Good morning, students. Today we'll be starting with a chapter number 4, that is supply, from the subject of economics. Now, in the previous chapter, you had learned about demand, the different types of factors that affect the demand. We had learned about the elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, etc. Now, in this chapter, we'll be learning what is meant by supply, what is meant by the term stock, the difference between stock and supply, the factors which affect supply. Then we'll be learning about what is meant by individual and market supply, what is meant by supply function. As we had learned law of demand, same way we'll be learning about law of supply also. The relationship between how at different prices the supply varies, the changes in supply, and we will also learning about the exceptions to the law of supply. Towards the end, we have how a price is determined for a commodity in the market. So now let us start with the first topic, that is what is meant by stock and supply. Now, demand and supply, they are both equally important determinants of price. And if we want to fully understand the concept of demand, we should also understand the concept of supply. Whenever we think about or learn about demand, we are always thinking from the consumer's point of view, that how a rational consumer will react at different prices. And a rational consumer will always see to it that when prices start increasing, his demand will start decreasing. That means whenever the price will rise, the demand will be coming down, and vice versa. When the prices are coming down or reducing or falling, then we can say the demand will expand. Now here, whenever we talk about supply, we will be thinking from a producer point of view, that what will a producer do when the prices will rise, what will he do when the prices are falling. In that way, you have to keep in mind that while learning demand, you have to think from the consumer point of view, and while learning supply, you have to learn it from the viewpoint of a producer. In that concept, it will be easier for you to understand. When you talk about the term supply, it is a fundamental economic concept that describes the total amount of a specific good or service that is available to a consumer. Each specific good or service will have its own supply and demand patterns based on the different terms of like price, the utility, and the personal preference. Now, production basically in business administration means the process of combining various material inputs and immaterial inputs like plans, methods, men, etc. It is an act of creating an output, whereas in economics it is the quantity of goods which is created by the available factors of production. Now let us understand the difference between the term supply and stock. For a layman, both these terms are almost same, but in economics they have different meanings for it. As we learn that in economics, the production is the quantity of goods that is created by the available factors of production. Factors of production, that is land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur, during a fixed time period. When you talk about the stock, it is the total quantity of goods that is available for sale with a seller at a particular point of time. Whereas the term supply over here refers to the quantity of goods that a seller is able and is willing to offer for sale at a particular price during a certain period of time. So you can say that supply is derived out of stock. So again I repeat, stock means the total available quantity that is that a producer has for selling. But whereas supply is that quantity of goods which the seller is ready to sell at the given price right now, or at the particular price during a particular period of time. Now let us take an example further for better understanding. Supposing you imagine that the stock is 100 kgs of apples that a producer has. But that particular producer is ready to sell only 70 kgs right now. So the supply will become 70. Okay, so you can have stock equal and supply can be same, but the supply cannot increase in terms of stock. That means stock will be maximum and supply will either be equal or will be less than the stock. Okay. Now, when we learnt about supply, if you remember, if you just recollect what I said, supply refers to the quantity of goods that a seller is able and willing to offer for sale. So, what terms did we see over here? The ability and the willingness. So, now let us understand the two concepts for understanding the meaning of supply. The very first one is willingness to sell. Now, a seller's willingness to sell can be measured by the minimum price the seller will accept for some good or services. That is, you can say the entire amount of a good available with a producer or the trader cannot be called supply, because maybe it is possible that he is not ready to sell or he is not willing to sell that entire stock right now at this price that is prevailing in the market. He may want a price rise, he may want to increase his profit, so he will supply in the market only some quantity of goods that are available in the stock. So it is the stock will become supply only when the producer is able and willing to sell at the given price and at a particular point of time. So that's the first concept, that is willingness to sell. The second one is the ability to sell. Now when we talk about the ability, it may happen that the seller is willing to sell 5,000 packets of a particular commodity, but the ability doesn't mean that he will have that much. Supposing if the availability of stock is only 2,000 units, then what will happen? In spite of having the ability, he is not able to sell entire 5,000. So the ability to sell any particular commodity in the market depends upon its availability. As given in the example in the textbook, the trader wants to sell or desires to sell 1000 packets of oil, but he has only 500 packets. So in that case, the supply will become 500 packets. So this is how the two concepts, that is the willingness to sell and the ability to sell, is understood from the viewpoint of the term of supply. So I think till now it is clear what is meant by stock, what is meant by supply, what is meant by the term production, and the two concepts that are involved in supply, that is the willingness to sell and the ability to sell. Now coming down to the difference between stock and supply. The very first difference is stock refers to the entire quantity of a commodity that is in the custody of the seller, whereas supply refers to the quantity of a commodity which is offered for sale at a given price and at a given time and place. That's the first difference. The second is stock will depend on the production. How much units are produced, stock will be depending on that, whereas supply will depend on the stock and the price that are prevailing in the market. So again I repeat, stock depends on production, supply depends on you can say stock and price. Stock can be greater or more than supply, but supply cannot be more than the stock. Stock consists of the current production as well as unsold stocks from the previous lot of production. So give an example, supposing if we talk about 2 months stock. In the previous month of April, we can say if the stock is 500 units which was left out, and in the current month again the production of another 1000 units has happened. So the currently available stock with the producer is 1500, that is the 1000 units which are produced now as well as the 500 units which were not sold in the previous month. So you can say another term of saying closing stock for the previous month becomes the opening stock plus the units that are produced right now in this month. So this is how stock will include current production and unsold stocks from the previous lot of production also. You can always say that for example, supposing stock is 1000 units, and for supply we can say that from the 1000 units the seller is willing to sell only 300 units. So supply is 300 units which the producer is ready to sell at the current price at a particular place and time. So this is how the difference between stock and supply can be understood. I think the concept of stock and supply is very clear to you students. Moving on to our next topic, that is the factors affecting supply. If you remember in the last chapter when we had learned how the taste and preferences, how the prices of substitute goods, related goods, then the demographic size of population, as well as you can say the income of the consumer, the expectations about future prices, and apart from all this, the price affected the demand. Same way over here also we have two parts which affect, or we can say two basic factors which affect supply. The first one is the price and the other one are the other factors in which you have another subdivision points. Now when you talk about the factors affecting, the supply refers to the quantity of a good that the producer plans to sell in the market. So supply will be determined by factors such as price, the number of suppliers, the technology that is available, the government subsidies, the future expectations, the environment, etc., etc. Now let us look into the first part, that is price. Now as price increases, the firms have an incentive to supply more because they get extra revenue, that is more profit from selling the goods, and vice versa. If the price falls, the supply will also be less in the market. So you can say price is a very important determinant of supply, and the producer for earning more profit will supply the goods when the prices are high, and when the prices fall down, the supply will become less in the market. So you can see a positive relationship between the price of a good and its supply. When we talked about demand, there was inverse relationship. Why? Because as and when the price rises, the demand would contract, and when the price falls, the demand would expand. But here they have a positive relationship, that is when the prices will rise, the supply will be more. When the prices will fall down, the supply will be less. Now talking about factors other than price, the very first one is the cost of production. Supply always gets affected by the cost of production, because whenever a particular price is determined for any commodity, the one thing that is kept in mind is the cost of production. In order to earn more profit, there has to be a difference between the price at which the commodity will be offered for sale and between the cost of production. If the cost of production decreases, then the profit will increase if the price remains unchanged. So the seller is willing to sell greater amounts, and vice versa. If the cost of production increases, then the profit will decrease. Now in the book they have given you an example, that is when rent is paid to the owner of land, the wages paid to the laborer decrease, the cost of production decreases. That is when the rent is made less, when the wages amount is reduced, automatically the cost of production for making that particular product will reduce. So when the cost of production decreases, the profit will increase. We can also say the supply will expand when the prices of factors of production falls, and when the cost of production rises, vice versa will happen. Coming to the next one, that is level of technology. Now in the level of technology, if the state of technology improvises or advances, or it may happen that the time and the efforts of preparing that particular commodity is reduced. So more amount of goods can be produced and more amount can be available for supply in the market at lower cost. So if the market price does not fall, then the profit will increase, and at this point of time, as a producer, they are ready to sell more in the market, due to which the supply will expand. So you can say the countries that use more advanced technologies, they are available to produce more at lower cost. Regarding the future expectations, it as in demand, if the future expectation was that the prices are going to fall, currently the consumer will reduce their demand for the particular commodity. But here it is just the opposite. In the future expectation about the price, if it is that the future expectation is that the price is going to rise in future, then they will contract the supply now and they will sell that particular commodity when the prices will rise in the market. Vice versa, if the expectation is that in the future the prices are going to fall, then currently the supply in the market of that particular commodity will increase because every producer wants to earn maximum profits. So I think you can see over here about the relationship between the price of the product and the supply, which had a positive relationship. You have seen how prices of factors of production affects, how the level of technology affects, how the future expectation regarding prices also affect the supply in the market. Coming down to the last topic, last point over here in this topic, that is other factors. Now apart from these three and the price, the supply gets affected by different other factors like the political stability, the natural conditions. If they are conducive, that means if they are in favor, then only the amount of supply can be increased in the market. If the law and order mechanism, the legal systems, the industrial relationships, they are all in favor of production of that particular commodity, then you can say that there will be enough supply in the market for that particular commodity. So when the other factors are in favor, the supply will be more, and when the other factors are not in favor, the supply will be less in the market. So here we can see how the different things or the different factors affect the amount of supply of a commodity in the market. So today we have completed till 4.3. In our next session of the videos, we'll be learning about individual supply and market supply. Till then, have a good time all of you. Thank you.